What's up, nerds? It's your boy, the OGGM, coming to you live from Site B, doing the thing again because apparently people want to see what I'm actually looking at when I talk about this stuff on SteamYard. So we're at SteamYard, and I'm drinking water. Support me, water. I will sell out. It's about 10:30 in the morning. It's the 26th day of December. Wow, this year's coming to an end. It's about 57 degrees and cloudy here at Site B, and we are looking at a deep dive of my favorite tabletop role-playing game that isn't Marvel, which is Villains and Vigilantes by Jeff D. and Jack Herman. We've been looking at it all month. We looked at Crisis at Crusader Citadels. Now we are looking at Death Duel of the Destroyers, the second module adventure that came out for Villains and Vigilantes by, here's a name some of you should recognize, Mr. Bill Willingham of famous art in several different products. Why is Death Duel and the Destroyer so important? It is perhaps as much as I love Crisis of Crusader Citadel, Death Duel and Destroyers is probably the most important of all the Village of Vigilantes comic books, universe, D&D products that they made because it gave us 1984 comic book universe of the Elementals. It lasted from 1984 till 1996, including the series of specials and miniseries. The Elementals was one of the very first dark comic books. So just imagine this, an entire 1984 through 1996, that's over 10 years long, run of a comic book that spun out of a V&V game. So what was the setting? The setting was basically taking the Death Duel the Destroyer, Island of Dr. Apocalypse, and spinning it into a comic book. Dr. Apocalypse was replaced by a sorcerer named Lord Saker, who built a machine called Shadow Spear to harness the supernatural powers of the world. He upset the natural order of the universe. In response, the four elements, unimagically powerful spirits, who together formed the foundations of existence, chose ordinary humans who had been killed and resurrected them to be the heroes to fight Saker and stop him from what he was doing. And this lasted forever. And we got characters and we got spin-offs. And that led to other comic books that Bill Willingham did, including his Pantheon comic book and his not safe for work other comic book. So the characters of the Elementals there was four of them, each representing a element. We had Morningstar, who was a homicide detective. She burned to death. She received various fire powers. She later went along to have a romantic relationship with an individual named Eric Chessman and even get pregnant with Chessman's child before finding out that Eric Chessman was actually the supervillainous shapeshifter disguised as a man. And so, yeah. And then that kid, the child, was given to the character from the other comic book, Dave Dragon, to deal with it because Morningstar did not want to raise the child of herself and Eric Chessman / shapeshifter. And we never found out what happened to that. Then we had Vortex, Jeff Mercy, who was a Coast Guard pilot who asphyxiated in a helicopter crash, and he got various flight powers. We had Fathom, who was a flighty debutante who fell off a boat and drowned. She received various water-related powers and bright screen skin and webbed fingers. She was able to turn her body into water and, of course, survive underwater. She had an on and off again relationship with Ratman, one of the former members of the Destroyers, who was a were-rat. And then we had Monolith, who was a teenage boy who had been crushed to death by a landslide, and he was an enormous, super strong earth golem. And then, of course, he became a bad guy. He quit the Elementals and became one of the bad guy's generals. But so the Monolith spirit was re-embodied into another guy who neither wanted the power nor even understood fully how to use it or how to integrate with the other Elementals. The four eventually defeated Lord Saker, aka Dr. Apocalypse, and his minions, the Destroyers, who consisted of Shapeshifter, probably the most powerful member, who, of course, amongst other things, disguised herself as a man named Eric Chessman to have a relationship with Morningstar, disguised herself once as the angel Gabriel to appear before a bunch of individuals and convince them to die in the name of God and come back as blessed spirits. Really, he was shapeshifter, hoping that if she killed enough people, she could have the same thing happen to them that happened to the elementals, and she would get a whole new team of powered individuals working for her who thought they were on a mission from God. We had Annihilator, who was just a very no-nonsense flying energy blaster. And in the comic book, he's an alien. I mean, in the module, he's an alien. In the comic book, he was sort of just like a sort of an Iron Man type. His big thing was nothing phased him. Everything they threw at him, he would like, I've seen this before. We had Chrysalis, who was a very interesting character, sort of a bug-themed power armor character. Chrysalis was not in Death, Duel, and Destroyer. And that was a scientist who discovered the Chrysalis armor and like injected herself with it and sort of became this bug-themed sort of crazy supervillain. We had Behemoth, who was just a big, strong guy. He was, the big, strong guy. When we were playing Death, Duel with the Destroyers, the DM had the Destroyers kidnap some important NPCs to the player characters, but for some reason they had Behemoth write the ransom letter, and Behemoth put the return address on the ransom letter. And when the DM handed us the ransom letter in the envelope, it literally took us 20 minutes to realize the return envelope was on the return address was on the envelope. There was Ratman, who was a were-rat, and he later changed sides to become a hero, and he had a whole mini-series. And then there was Electrocutioner, who was just a guy with electricity powers. The Destroyers and an early version of Sacred, known as Dr. Apocalypse, originally appeared in Death, Duel, Destroyers in the island of Dr. Apocalypse, which were, written by Willingham for Villains of Vigilante. And yeah, it was, widely well received. There's a whole bunch of one-shots, and the entire series is available. It also led to the birth of Justice Machine, Strike Force America, and Bill Willingham's other comic book, The Pantheon. So yeah, I mean, we got to end our deep dive of Villains of Vigilantes with taking a look at Death, Duel with the Destroyer, Island of Dr. Apocalypse, and the work of Mr. Willingham, and how he created this whole comic book universe out of a Villains of Vigilantes adventure. So yeah, and here they are. Here's the Destroyers: Shapeshifter, Annihilator, Behemoth, Ratman, Electrocutioner, and Chrysalis. Yeah, Chrysalis and Shapeshifter were my favorite. So yeah, there you go, V&V. That brings our deep dive into Villains of Vigilantes to an end. Hopefully you've appreciated this and a look at the Death, Duel with the Destroyer / Elementals comic books. If you're ever lucky enough to find the trade paperbacks, links down below. They're worth reading. They're a little weird, but they're definitely, were very, dark comic books like the Watchmen and that stuff were very popular at that time. And the Elementals were great. Plus, there's a lot of sort of, ecche fan service in it. So they did like the Elementals lingerie specials and the Elemental sex specials. And then he had his whole other Wormwood, Ironwood comic book that was very much not safe for work, including a very interesting depiction of a Hydra. You can just use your imagination for that one. Yeah. Check it out. Bill Willingham's The Elementals, a comic book that was inspired by a Villains of Vigilantes adventure called Death, Duel, Destroyers. I'm tired, so that's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow with our regularly scheduled nonsense. Until then, if you appreciate the words that are occasionally coming out of my mouth, let me know. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, please subscribe. Help me hit 1 billion subs by the end of 2023. And remember, this is my job. So if you want to support me, there are a lot of ways you can do it. You can do it with the Patreon. You can do it with the super shops. You can do it with the special thank yous, or you can check out my merch, including the t-shirts, which are back live. My t-shirts are back. I thought they wouldn't be, but they're back. So yeah, links down below to everything I just talked about. Talk to you later. See ya.